the majority of Egyptians living in Cairo, I mean, they don't have their roots in Cairo. So of course they have also something between an insider and outsider perspective. Obviously they have a different access to what's going on in town in terms of social interaction than most foreigners have.
I like very much to walk in the historic Cairo. When I saw the area I was a little bit, let's say, disgusted the first time that I went there. And I said, I will not go back to Egypt again. I want to forget about, I want to be Egyptologist in Italy, in Rome. When I come back in Cairo, I started to interact with these people of the area. I started to understand, I appreciated many things that for me before they were not understandable.
Heritage in Cairo is difficult to place or to link with a particular space. It's something that can take place everywhere.
The heritage has a value that we are giving to it. It means community, society, international community. Really, the heritage is very strongly related to the identical values of the people.
I mean, of course, with time it became something very much interwoven with personal experiences. Heritage could also be whatever, a little girl singing a song to me, you know, on a boat, or whatever, a particular way that people prepare their tea or something. I mean, things that you observe in your daily life.
Heritage in Arabic is turath. The root meaning for the word also includes the word mirth. M-I-R-T-H. And mirth is a birthright. Heritage is something that you inherit from people who've gone before, but with the added idea that it's something that you hold in trust from people that you will pass it on to.
In these countries there is a stratification of history which is interesting, very interesting.
A footprint of previous invasions, previous influences, previous civilizations even.
Il n'y a pas de temps ici, on pourrait être dans n'importe quel siècle, hein, quand on se balade surtout dans le Vieux-Caire, dans le quartier islamique, ou dans plein de quartiers au Caire, ou même pas loin d'ailleurs au Boulac, tu fais des petites rues, mais on peut être à la campagne, quoi, on peut être n'importe où. Et n'importe quel siècle, enfin, s'il n'y a pas de voiture, je ne dessine jamais de voiture, ni de moto, ni de ça, n'importe quoi, parce que je ne veux pas que ça rentre dans ma toile, parce que justement je ne veux pas donner d'éléments qui viendraient perturber l'image que je vois.
I like your phrase, about the layering of the heritage. I think that's probably what's so inherently fascinating about Cairo. It is so layered. You can think about it in civilizational terms. It's been a succession of civilizations and a succession of occupations. There's a Christian Cairo, an Islamic Cairo, and they're still here. Nothing goes away, it just kind of builds one on the other. So that makes it endlessly interesting. If you get tired of one layer of Cairo, there's always another. And Cairo is more than Cairo. It's more than just a city, it's more than an Egyptian city. It really is one of the hearts of the Arab world and the Islamic world.
Because Al-Azhar is one of the most important universities in the Arab region.
The dust is a kind of, the dryness and the kind of the grime of this place. We're in a valley in the middle of a desert, so it's going to be dusty.
For me, the biggest heritage of Cairo is the river. And how the people are living and interacting with the river.
The most important thing is the community and how community values what it has.
Egypt without the Nile could not exist. The other countries, they have other natural sources, so they could exist without the Nile.
In America, of course, American English, they don't talk about heritage, they talk about cultural resources. And what we call cultural heritage management in Europe is cultural resource management in the States. And the resource is something very different. The resource is something you exploit. I mean, you can steward it so that it lasts a long time, but you still exploit it.
If they're all paying to get into those monuments, and they're buying things from the various shops and so on, or restaurants, and sitting down, and they're going to remember all this, and they're going to come again, and they're going to send their children and their grandchildren, and unless you have tourists, they don't. It just sits there and doesn't mean anything, because your locals are not going to pay to keep them up.
Very often they are marginalized from these incomes because it goes to the travel agencies, to the hotel chains, to the companies that are delivering services inside, and they are absolutely marginalized, and they are not seeing any kind of benefit except looting it or whatever.
It depends a huge amount on outside interest, tourism, economic. Outside donors.
At the beginning it was really to make out of them a pure museum without people living, but that makes them very spiritless, And then it was a little bit a tendency of bringing back people, but rich people, not the people who originally were living, but the people who have enough means to adapt these kind of things to their needs.
But an attempt to preserve a traditional style, traditional craft, has now become an elite, well, it always was an elite thing. I think Hassan Patti made a huge mistake when he called his book Architecture for the Poor. If he'd called it Architecture for the Rich, everyone would have wanted it. The tourist sites, the major sites which are tourist destinations, these are maintained through tourism. They're maintained because of their economic significance, their economic value. And people who are not invested in that economic value, that's to say people whose livelihoods depend on it, have no contact. And with the disappearance of foreign visitors, which includes of course scholars and academics who come as foreign visitors as well, there is no local tourism that has moved into the vacuum.
Sometimes, they don't visit not because they are not keen or interested, because for their economical problematics, I felt this, but most of them, they know what it means, pharaohs and pyramids, but many of them, they never visited the Coptic area or the Islamic area.
Okay.
And we always think that although in Egypt there is one of the most important Islamic heritage of the region, by the way, the Egyptians, they consider their own heritage the pharaonic one, because this can be found only in Egypt. The other is a regional heritage, not belonging only to Egypt.
I'm a bad person to work in heritage protection, because I have too wide an idea of what actually is worth to be taken into consideration. I mean, you cannot protect everything. I mean, anyway, because much about what is heritage is also about what is actually a living tradition. And if there is no use for something anymore, it just means that the society has moved on to do something else. So, and then for me there's a bifurcation, or I have like an internal division. One is that basically I say, well, you see, history moves on, and if there is no need for that anymore, there is very little that you can do in artificially maintaining it, because anyway you would freeze it in a way, and then it's not really, it's not going to have the meaning for the people that it used to be. It actually becomes an object for the projection of the meaning, but it's not a living meaning anymore.
Having contemporary meaning, making it look what modern aesthetics require of a building with status. The Copts know that they are seen by a lot of foreigners as a kind of remnant left over from the past. Ancient church doing ancient kinds of things. But they want to be perceived as part of modern, vibrant, contemporary cultural Egypt. If they have a historic church which is very run down and its paintings very dirty so you can't see them, they might well be inspired to demolish it and get rid of it and build a nice new church which presents a very modern, contemporary idiom for their culture.
Comme la pierre et le bois ici sont rares, ils ont détruit les monuments pour construire leur propre truc. La plupart des seuils, des barres de seuil des mosquées anciennes, c'est toujours du pharaonique. Les pyramides, elles ont été couvertes de grès, hein, comme la pyramide de Dachour. Quand on va à Dachour, on voit la seule qui a encore son parement de grès. Toutes les autres, elles l'ont plus. Donc ça va être carrière. Ça aussi, c'est une notion qui est importante à comprendre dans la notion de patrimoine. C'est que le patrimoine, il sert à faire du présent. Il sert pas à magnifier l'ancien.
So old has to be made valuable and to give meaning for today's use, like Luxor Temple. Pyramids have gone through a process of adaptive reuse which has turned them into tourist attractions or objects of scholarly research, which is not what they were made for by the ancient Egyptians.
You find old palaces, like the stuff where this wooden balcony comes from.
Yes.
That, I mean, part of them are still being inhabited, other parts are being used as workshops, or people keep whatever on the ground floor, the goats or something. And I mean, these of course are not the uses that these buildings were originally planned for, but I mean, then using buildings in the way that they were not being planned for has always been part of the history of such buildings from the beginning, usually. So, and I would rather would like to see the approach that one would see, okay, I mean, what the people are doing with the building now reflects their needs for what they actually need in terms of space and functions in their neighborhood. And maybe this building, obviously, it can fulfill this function. So maybe one should find a way of having, well, of developing guidelines and a system of assisting these people to actually have these buildings fulfill the function without damaging the buildings too much.
When it comes down to it, the people there are happy to have their historic buildings repaired and made more usable. So that has a huge impact on social development and the raising of people's self-esteem and their pride in what they have, rather than living in a rundown, derelict community.
Between the life improvement, reproduction of their traditional activities, and the conservation of the monuments. This is not an easy challenge.
Archaeology is not about things, it's about people. It's about the context in which people have done things. People, community, the uses and the understandings they have for things, and the fact that one is a player in all of that, but in somebody else's context as well.
So I mean, this is I think it's an ongoing battle of people about actually whose is this and who's supposed to use it for what. I would personally always rather be with the people from the neighborhood that actually do something with the building just the way they need. Although of course this is not something that is sort of like a romantic community living. No, I mean, these people are also struggling with each other, and if someone takes a room and uses this for something, maybe his neighbor is very angry about this because he doesn't like this, because he makes noise and he makes dirt, and actually it disturbs him. So these things are continuously being negotiated between the people, and it's not fun, But I think it's a sustainable way of use in a way, because actually this is what is being reproduced within the people who actually are in that space, and it's not like an external institution coming in.
N'importe quel bâtiment ici peut devenir n'importe quoi. Et on va changer les choses, on va utiliser un sabil coutable pour en faire une maison d'habitation ou un entrepôt. Puis le jour où il tombe, il tombe. Et puis c'est comme ça. Et cette notion de patrimoine est une notion occidentale qu'on a ramenée ici et qui finalement ne sert pas. Elle est elle est hors culture.
But it's all the same in Cairo. It always goes back to the same thing. Too many people trying to make a living. Well, that essentially excuses anything, but it doesn't really, not if you're interested in cultural heritage. Though I hesitate to say it, but what I mean is you have to get police back in there. There's no hope if you don't.
In this case, the church, which was built in the 6th century, has survived because it's been used as a church. But now, the most destructive aspect of it is its use as a church, but it has to carry on as a church because that is how the local people will value it.
The Antiquity Service doesn't want to do it, as you know. And they're right. They say, you know, why should we have to do it? I mean, that should be under the budget of the Ministry of Interior and not taking our money away to try to police things. And it really is. But it's so fragile here, you see.
Funding conservation and preservation is not all for altruistic reasons. There's a political agenda attached to it as well.
It is only through tourism that memory will be maintained. Nothing else.
Maybe the Japanese idea, this idea of taking it all down every 20 years and rebuilding it, this may be the solution. Earthquakes, or this idea of it all being impermanent anyway. Buddhist idea of impermanence. Very different notion to keeping these things, focusing on the preservation.
And the perception that the heritage is something that it's very much attached to the, I'm calling it old stones, and to the value of the authenticity of an ancient object or an ancient building or an ancient futures. Then you have a very different perception because, well, I had this experience of working in Southeast Asia, and it's mainly related never to the old stone, never, but it's very much related to the know-how, to the repetition, you know, how you are producing it, how you are doing it, whether you are keeping the original materials, whether you are keeping the original even tools to produce whatever it is. So this is, and you can even see the reflection of it in the two different restoration charters. It's a Venice charter and Nara charter.
Le truc fait que on est toujours dans cette espèce de recherche de sauver un patrimoine, et compte tenu du fait qu'on considère que notre patrimoine européen a été tellement sauvé aujourd'hui qu'il est même complètement figé à l'intérieur d'une sorte de carcan dont on ne sortira plus. Et donc on va ailleurs former des gens pour étudier une architecture ou une culture qui est pas forcément la nôtre ou qui a été la nôtre à un moment de notre histoire, mais il n'y a pas de passerelle de l'autre côté. Donc on ne peut pas demander à des gens qu'on vient soutenir de faire des choses qu'ils ne savent pas faire, et qu'ils ne savent pas faire culturellement.
You have to realize that it doesn't belong to you, that it belongs to somebody else. And you are here by invitation. You have to try and make a big effort to understand that the importance it has to that community is what's paramount. And that is what's going to decide whether a thing is preserved or not.
Can you turn over the building restored to the Egyptian government? Will they open it and maintain it? The answer is it's theirs. And whatever they do, it's their decision. It is not my right to tell them anything. It's my responsibility to suggest.
It's the government who decides their priorities in the protection of such a heritage, intangible heritage. In any country, you are first of all consulting the communities, because this is very close to them and it's something that belongs to them, and only them can say that it's our heritage, whether it's tradition of last 50 years or tradition of last 5,000 years.
So I was really very taken with Cairo from the beginning of all of these places. And this place here, Groppe, is a place that I came as a student in the 1960s. So I'm very attached to it.
There's the Maridani Mosque, which I like very much. It's a space with intimacy and calmness because you enter from this Dar al Ahmar street through a monumental gate, but you enter into a courtyard that is very, very calm. Usually you have kids sitting there doing their school homework.
J'aime bien les petites rues autour du Wakalat el-Bala. Ici c'est le souk au tissu.
I used to go to Sayyida Zainab. You know, there are sacred places, sacred spaces in the city. And Sayyida Zainab is one of them. It's in a poorer section of the city. It's a beautiful mosque.
Mohamed Ali, là, tu sais, où il y a l'espèce de grand magasin. Bon, il y a un côté désuet, dans cet abandon. C'est ça qui est pas mal, parce qu'en fait, les gens, ils continuent à jouer aux marchands, alors qu'il n'y a plus rien avant. Et ils font comme si, quoi. Donc c'est assez... ça m'a toujours paru parfois certaines scènes un peu comme si on jouait, tu sais, quand on est enfant, on joue aux marchands.
For me, the discovery was the end of 19th, beginning of 20th century's Cairo. Let's say called it not modern, but this Art Deco and all these periods of Cairo that has its own phase.
And the finest Art Deco building in Cairo was used as a Russian cultural center. It was in Zamalek, was opposite the Swiss embassy. And in 1982 it was knocked down and became a hole in the ground. The finest Art Nouveau building in Cairo is a police station in Helmea, which fortunately, perhaps because it has been a police station, has not been knocked down.
Opera Square. So I go there, which is ridiculous because the opera's no longer there. It is. I see it. I know exactly where it is. There's now a parking garage there.
At some point, over the aqueduct, you have this traditional activity of the people that are living behind the aqueduct in the old city. They are the professional dyers of the leather. It's a kind of tricky wooden boxes where they have a very, very tiny space between the levels, because they are putting there the skins for drying up. It's really very beautiful. So above the aqueduct you have these structures that are like skyscrapers but in wood.
There's a very famous Arab traveler, and this is part of the heritage actually. It's a 14th century figure. His name is Ibn Battuta. And Ibn Battuta wrote a volume that's like 700-800 pages describing his travels. It's absolutely fascinating. So it's been in my mind for decades.
Downtown in like the Talat Harb area, again, I just think of the evenings, you know, walking around in the evenings there with you know, dozens and dozens of cafes and people sitting out and playing backgammon or dominoes, drinking their tea, drinking their coffee, smoking their shisha, and walking up and down and seeing the shops, and you have the folks, you know, with their you know, spread out with their shoes and belts and whatever little things for sale on the side of the street. I mean, this is a real collection of people, and it's really crowded.
When you speak with the people and you interact in their own language, then this is culture. Because they start to speak about their ancient history, about Naguib Mahfouz.
It's more uncomfortable if I'm in a group or if I have kids with me, just because I worry about them getting lost or all of that sort of thing. But when I'm on my own, no, it's wonderful, because you just feel connected to everybody.
I remember that I was dreaming, you know, since the area is full of mosques, you know, and for 5 times during the day we were listening to the muezzin, you know. I was missing this. But not only the mosques and the monuments, but the people living there. And I understood how much it is important, the intangible heritage, that you cannot cut the two.
You know, these book stalls where you go and there's just sort of hundreds and hundreds of stalls with books for sale. really neat stuff. There's a circus, there's a national circus, there's a zoo, all of these things that from time to time we've sort of ventured out and gone to check them out, and they've always been just a little bit difficult. Like the puppet theater, which was what a neat idea to take kids to, was too loud. And so halfway through the show we had to leave because the girls were just covering their ears.
Et c'est ça que j'aime bien, mais je crois qu'on aime tous ça en fait, cette espèce de choc assez permanent quand même. Alors après on le voit plus, on le voit, mais dès qu'on décide de s'arrêter puis de regarder, bon bah alors là on est quand même assez sidéré, puis même dans les intérieurs de maisons, enfin tout quoi.
Another area I like is Cairo. Cairo is a market area, and it's like one of the few old markets that's still there. So I try to go there maybe twice a week. And you really feel like it's old Egypt.
Which kind of market? Products like
produce, yeah. You can get things like sella that you can't. It's a green that you can't find anyplace else. That says older things are there.
Downtown, definitely.
Downtown.
It was my favorite activities when I moved here in 2003, and even when I was here shortly 2001. Friday morning before prayer, to take a taxi and just go downtown and stroll. Before prayer, when the streets are still quiet, and look at some shop windows and see the bizarreness of them, and then walk over to the book market in Azbakiya in downtown and bargain for books. That was one of my favorite activities. That's one thing I love to do in the city, on my own. That used to be, it's a massive open stall book market where you can find everything from like classic editions of 1001 Nights to modern, fiction in all languages.
In some parts, the old Cairo was like Venice. It was with canals and with lakes, and they were sometimes seasonal lakes because they were filled by the Nile that was overflowing and then going back to it. You have some streets, and if you even feel that this street before it was a canal, it's very narrow, and the level of houses is much lower than the level of the street, because if you will learn to read this in historic Cairo, it will be even more attractive.
Also going downtown when I was young, my family had an apartment in Mohandesin when we were growing up here. But whenever we would visit someone downtown, a family friend or one of my business partners, when I was a little girl, it always seemed like going into modern land, it's like another country to me. And I remember specifically passing through the bridge with the Qasr al-Aini, where the lions are, and it was always like a very exhilarating feeling, like we're going downtown.
There's a real self-isolation in Egyptian society. People that I know and work with who might live in Haram or in Mohandesin will not want to come to Maadi because it's a strange, different place. And it's just, they're going to get lost, they're going to be unfamiliar.
For me, Cairo is the sound of car horns.
You always will hear traffic sound somewhere in the background, and you're lucky if it's far enough away so it's not bothering you.
It's never really quiet. Like you always have noise from traffic or from people or from the loudspeakers of the prayer. Like there's always some human noise going on.
Music or radio on Quran that's running in the background. Our gardener, actually, where we live, he has a habit to actually, in the evening around 10ish, 11, he puts on the radio in this little shed, and then he leaves it on until 2 at night. And he puts it very loud. The volume level has increased recently, so I decided to, when I come back today, actually I'm going to ask him if he can keep it a bit lower. Because I assume that actually he's sleeping with that noise. He sits in silent there taking care of the parking lot the whole day, so maybe he likes this as a distraction at night.
De toute façon, que tu le veuilles ou non, tu es dedans. Tu es dans le bain des embouteillages, du bruit, là on ne choisit pas. La seule façon de choisir, si tu veux, c'est... je me rappelle à l'époque où je prenais beaucoup le métro et je marchais entre l'atelier et mon appartement. je mettais la musique à fond, mon iPod à fond, je me crée mon propre bruit pour pas entendre celui des autres, mais je suis obligée de me coller du bruit pour ça. Donc c'est un truc de fou. Alors là, tu choisis pas. Effectivement, puis on va choisir des petites balades pour me réconcilier un peu avec tout ça. C'est fatigant, mais voilà, il y a ce truc un peu comme si on était un peu addict et un peu c'est hors de notre volonté, quoi. On est en colère contre la ville, les gens, puis alors après, 5 minutes après, tu vas décolérer et parce qu'il va y avoir une petite scène visuelle qui va t'enchanter.
Sheer energy surging through the streets. And this I've experienced this several times. And I can't even describe it. It's like a physical force. And so of course you perceive it. It's palpable. You know, it's not that there are 100,000 people. It's that somehow they're moving together. They're sloganing together.
I think they like to have noise around in order to be able to concentrate. I mean, I have this with students and also professor colleagues at university that people are always talking in the background. There's things going on and talking, and people coming in and out, and this is how this is how it's supposed to be. Everything else would somehow feel strange, probably. So I find it, and this is something, I mean, that you have to get used to that, because it can be very tiresome. And I think it's something that also that takes up a lot of energy on a daily basis from you, and that you have to recover somehow.
I guess it's sort of how crowded it is, but within, and chaotic, right? I mean, it's very, it's disorganized in many ways, but within that chaos, everybody kind of works together to make things happen. If you get a really bad traffic jam, at some point, somebody will just stand up and take charge and start directing traffic. Like just anybody. They just help each other out. My younger daughter, we went on a bicycle ride the other day and she fell over in the street, and instantly 8 people had come up to pick her up.
Oh, wow.
And this is very common.
Very
Yeah. There's 2 sides to this coin. On one hand, everybody works together. On the other hand, you can't ever have any privacy.
L'intimité n'existe pas au Caire. Il n'y a aucune intimité. Je ne sais pas comment ils font. Ils sont toujours ensemble, toujours. Par exemple, ma voisine, tu vois, elle a 2 filles. Moi, elle me disait à une époque, elle me disait, je rêve que d'une chose, c'est de partir, d'être toute seule dans une maison. Alors je lui ai dit, mais va voir sa sœur, elle a une maison à Agami ou à la mer. Je lui ai dit, mais va voir ta sœur à Agami. Elle dit, non, je peux pas, les enfants. Je fais, attends, tes filles, elles sont grandes, elles peuvent se faire cuire un œuf, elles peuvent se faire. Oui, mais mon mari, mais je fais ton mari, tes filles, elles n'ont qu'à faire à manger, il a qu'à faire à manger. Non, elle ne peut pas les laisser. En tant que femme, en tout cas, lui, je ne sais pas s'il pourrait le faire. En tout cas, il ne le fait pas, il ne part pas non plus. Et ce que je vois du peuple égyptien, ce sont des gens fatigués, épuisés.
To take a break from the city, just hop in a car and drive towards the Alexandria Road and just drive back. And just be part of this impression that we're leaving the city, but we come back. It's a very nice feeling.
Here, the subtlety of human interaction is astonishing. You know, the phrasing, the looks, the glances, everything is very, very meaningful.
Marchander, je le fais automatiquement. Ça fait partie du jeu d'ici. C'est une façon de parler, de communiquer. Alors, si on a le temps, il faut s'asseoir, je ne le prends pas souvent. J'avoue que je ne suis pas très patiente. Mais quand tu prends le temps, c'est bien. Et puis après, à ce moment-là, si ça peut dégénérer, puis après, effectivement, si tu bois le thé, etc., tu peux bien parler un peu avec les commerçants aussi.
Walking the streets, people would make eye contact, people would joke and be friendly. Even, crossing the street, an event which, is a bit dangerous, you'd see the driver and they'd either, they give you, some recognition. And so that kind of connects, that personal connection.
Mais en même temps, c'est vrai qu'ils ont une façon de te regarder, les Égyptiens, ils n'hésitent pas à te mater et puis à te dire des choses un peu cash, tu vois. Donc là, on est repéré, bon, il suffit que ce soit juste un pot vert comme toi, tu vois, déjà on va avoir notre coup, donc je pense que, je sais parce que même moi maintenant je suis attirée par les peaux, non, la peau. Par exemple, si je vois quelqu'un en short ou une fille en jupe, je vais faire comme les mecs, je mate, parce que je suis attirée, parce qu'on voit plus, on voit que du noir, du brun, du voile, du tissu tout le temps, puis soudain tu vois un bout de peau. Alors tu regardes et puis c'est beau un bout de peau en fait.
If you look at 19th century photographs of Cairo, everything was falling down. All the mosques, they were all in a state of complete ruin, and it was the Comité de Conservation du Monument de l'Art which was responsible for letting us have those buildings now, iconic landmarks as the Ibn Tulun Mosque, the tops of the minarets on the Babzuela.
J'ai travaillé sur les manuscrits, alors je les ai photographiés, photographié les manuscrits anciens. On ne sait jamais vraiment quelle est trop la période, parce que c'est des choses qui peuvent être très anciennes, mais c'est recopié à chaque fois. Donc finalement, comme on recopie, on recopie, et puis il y a un moment où finalement, il n'y a plus de vrais penseurs et de vrais chercheurs arabes vers la fin du Moyen-Âge, parce qu'à partir de ce moment-là, ils se querellaient pour savoir qui avait fait quoi, et finalement plus personne ne trouvait. Et finalement, c'est comme ça qu'il y a eu cette extinction.
If we make decisions now, those decisions will impact what people in the future will have to experience and enjoy, in the same way that decisions made by past people have decided what we have to enjoy and to experience. This is why conservation through documentation is a very crucial thing, that to record what is here now, cleaning wall paintings that have been dirty for centuries so you can see them, so that you can photograph them with the highest quality digital imagery that we have now. So that when, not if, but when the original disappears, it's preserved in another format. Photographing the streets, photographing the way of life in the streets, photographing the way that people interact with their built environment. Recording what they have to say about it. Where is authenticity now? What can you talk about something being an authentic reproduction? Because it reproduces the original in such a way that when you look at the reproduction, you're looking at something that is so close to the original that it doesn't really matter. But on the other hand, authenticity of place is the one thing that you can't take away from something, because when somebody goes to the Sistine Chapel, they want to stand in the Sistine Chapel and look at the actual paintings that Michelangelo painted.
It is a continuation, the pyramids and what come after the pyramids. But if you take the pyramids without the context, you can put the pyramids in Louvre, in Rome, in New York. It is a monument.
If it's really a piece of the ancient temple, like the Ishtar Gate in Pergamon Museum, or like the slabs of Assyrian temples in British Museum, this is really absolutely ruthless. You can appreciate the effort of conserving it and studying it and researching it, but you cannot appreciate the chemistry that you are appreciating when you are standing at the plateau and you are seeing these absolutely voluptuous, hills covered by sand, and the pyramids that are raising out, and the Sphinx that it's down. This is magic.
And many of these places in this country are still in use. Extremely old churches and mosques which are still in use, and therefore they have a living resonance with people, which has to do with their contemporary religious and social life, rather than viewing them as historic monuments.
In the old Cairo souk, you have like this. This is the souk of lemon. This is the souk of tanks. This is the souk of copper smell. This is etc. So Because of this is a kind of urban mentality when you are very attached to the place. For example, the people who are living around the pyramids, they are attached because they are living out of pyramids. They have carriages, camels, horses, whatever, you know.
Ce sont des endroits historiques qui sont récupérés aujourd'hui comme étant des ateliers, comme étant des trucs comme ça, bon, où les gens travaillent, des vieux hammams où les mecs font des vêtements, des sables Kuta où les mecs font des vêtements, des petits palais où les types font de la mécanique, etc. Bon, il y a ça, mais en centre-ville, il y a plein d'immeubles dans lesquels il y a des tailleurs, il y a des cordonniers, il y a des gens qui font des vêtements, il y a des trucs et des machins. Bon, tout ça, c'est de la récupération de choses qui n'existaient pas. Et de petit à petit, cette espèce de changement, de mutation permanente qui se passe. Et qui est hyper importante, mais elle n'est pas spectaculaire.
Ethiopia is my home, you mean?
Your home?
Yes, of course, yes. This is where my children were born and grew up. Yes, yes. Anyway, wherever I stay, it's my home. I feel very connected with World Heritage. I mean, I've traveled all over the world looking at buildings, and I would be just as annoyed at the loss, say, of a Buddhist temple in Japan or a mosque in China or a temple in China as a church in Ireland.
Which is a kind of common solidarity and responsibility for something important for different people.
It's also possible to consider yourself a world citizen and feel that the heritage of the world is something that you should be able to enjoy with everybody else.
I hope that Egypt will emerge and play its role alongside Iran. This ridiculous schism, Shia Sunnah, Egypt has to help to transcend that. The new Islamists can do that with their moderate Islam. They must link to Turkey. You have a natural triangular relationship. These are the major centers, they're the major peoples that made the Islamic civilization, the Iranians, the Turks, and the Arabs. So it's a natural cultural civilization on a strategic alliance. It could be the basis of a, they say in Arabic, nahda, a renaissance.
L'Égypte, elle existe depuis 6000 ans, en tant que pays. Donc ça aussi, ça change dans la mentalité.
That gives you some kind of life stability. This family is here, although they can have something else. They are here for last probably, despite the revolution, despite the changes and everything, they are in the same pharmacy with the same shelves for last 80 years, 90 years. And this is exactly what I would wish to see, but more than 80 years, 300 years, 400 years. When you are a community that is continuously under threat, you are forced to develop some faculties to protect your identity. And then your identity is like everything, from your very ancient history till today as one part.
I don't know if you noticed, for the last couple of days there have been virtually no police on the streets. Let me tell you, if this happened in New York, this would be unbelievable, the chaos. Somehow, there's a kind of self-organization, and I think it does have something to do with this being such an ancient race, and this being such a people with such a long tradition. You come to the square, there are no police, there's no theft, there's no robbery, women are everywhere in the square. There were some ugly incidents, a couple, they became the symbol of what happened. But we were here 2 nights ago, there were women all over the place, with no police. And the shops are everywhere.
Je rentre du centre-ville en métro, parce que j'habite juste à côté du métro. Et dans le wagon, ça c'était hallucinant, j'avais jamais vu ça de ma vie. Et nulle part, pourtant j'ai voyagé. Dans le wagon, il y avait la moitié du wagon qui parlait politique avec l'autre moitié du wagon. Alors c'était pas difficile, on ne pouvait pas se tromper. Ceux qui avaient une barbe, je pense qu'ils pensaient à quelque chose. Ceux qui avaient la moustache, je pense qu'ils pensaient à autre chose. Bon. Et tout le monde parlait. Et alors, ils parlaient fort, etc. Mais il n'y avait aucune violence. Bon. Comme d'habitude, il y en a un qui me dit non, non, mais tu sais, c'est pas grave, ils se parlent, etc. Et moi, je lui réponds en arabe. Je lui dis c'est bien qu'ils se parlent. Vous parliez comme ça avant? Et le type, il m'a regardé, il m'a embrassé. Il m'a embrassé. Parce que, voilà, parce que il était content de voir qu'on pouvait penser que c'était comme ça aussi. Et ça, c'est hyper émouvant. C'est impossible. En France, un wagon qui parlerait politique, et c'est l'émeute, quoi. Je veux dire, il y a un moment, ils ont tout, ils cassent tout, quoi. Bon, en Italie, c'est même pas envisageable. C'est des questions de dignité, c'est des questions de liberté. La liberté, c'est pas pouvoir passer une vitrine ou voler une bagnole. La liberté, c'est pouvoir s'exprimer, c'est pouvoir dire ce qu'on pense. Et là, voir 50 personnes dans un wagon, 25 avec une idée, 25 avec une autre, qui se parlent fort, ça c'est sûr, hein, ils se disaient pas bonjour, mais qui se parlent comme ça, mais qui se tapent pas dessus, et voilà, et puis tout, j'ai trouvé ça remarquable. C'était remarquable.
In the Islamic civilization, there's Jews and Christians as well as Muslims. And we're part of it. So what was extraordinary to me was to see that come alive with the revolution, which is just a stone's throw. People, you know, there's a very Islamic spirit. You probably heard some of the other wonderful things that happened in the square. For example, you know, it was very brutal. This was a very brutal military regime. So there were attacks on people. One of the responses of the Muslims, there would be a row of guards, and they would look them right in the face and then pray. And they prostrate themselves, which they're totally vulnerable. The Christians made cordons around the Muslims while they prayed. It's kind of protection. And then on Sunday, the Muslims reversed it. So, you know, that's what I mean by this Islamic spirit. I mentioned it earlier, you know, when you say Islam, it doesn't mean Muslim, it doesn't mean fanaticism. It's a very inclusive, very tolerant, very pluralistic faith. And it still is.
We saw that happen on when was it? The 12th of February. It was extraordinary. After Mubarak sat down, everyone went to the streets with broomsticks, cleaning, doing the job of the state. Cairo never looked so clean. And I got very upset with downtown when I lived there. That's why I decided to leave. It became unbearable. Now I can't live there anymore. I've been subjected to too much very unpleasant physical and verbal harassment that I just, every time I walk there now, my physique changes. You know, I'm just like this. I was harassed once in my car, physically groped in my car, followed into the buildings many times, and I just grew tired of dressing different or just walking with earphones. Every time before I step into the city now, when I was living there, I couldn't just open the door and go. I always have to consider, what am I wearing? Shall I wear my earphones? I don't want to hear anymore. So it's very exhausting. As a woman, I couldn't relax. I couldn't stroll and walk and enjoy anymore. My hopeful vision is a city that accepts difference of class, race, gender.
Le type qui écrit dégage, par exemple, en français et qui est français, n'a pas à intervenir dans une révolution égyptienne comme ça. C'est pas son problème. Surtout que lui, il le fait en plus pour régler son problème à lui, qui était son problème de faire partir Sarkozy, qui n'était pas du tout aussi un problème égyptien, bien sûr, on ne peut pas lui enlever ça. Et ce que je veux dire par là, c'est que moi je pense que là on n'a pas bougé, on n'a pas à intervenir.
I raised children here. I have 4 children. I raised them part of the time here. I have grandchildren that are Egyptian, so I wonder what the future is going to be for them. I have 3 actually, 2 girls and 1 boy. I hope and pray the tourists will come back. Because this is a tourist country, so I encourage foreigners to return as soon as they possibly can. Take a little risk. Come back. You're here. I'm here. We're okay.
Usually, once people have sorted you out a bit, they're very, very happy that someone is interested in that, because these people, very often, they've worked for 40 years, say, in this factory. And the factories say maybe it's 90 years old or 100 years old, but they know that it's I mean, they like the building. They say this is a beautiful building, you know, and then they explain you this and that and how this worked and that functioned and whose task was what and all this. And they're very, very happy that they can actually have someone to share this with, particularly in cases where these buildings have been shut down, because I mean a lot of older factories have been put out of function in the past decade or so. So you have people actually there that are still sort of like maintaining the place, but the factories are not running. And so they're very, very happy that actually someone comes and says, and makes them feel that this is actually something of interest. It validates their own life experience in a way. You know?
Moi, il m'intéresse parce que je rencontre des gens et que je rencontre des gens qui me racontent leur histoire, etc. Donc à chaque fois, c'est un nouveau truc. Puis après, comme je les prends en photo, j'en reviens et puis j'en reviens avec la photo. Bon. Et alors là, ils racontent vraiment. Et là, c'est intéressant parce qu'ils se lâchent un petit peu. Alors ici, jamais sur les questions de politique. Hein. Moi, j'interdis toute notion de politique ou de religion. Hein. Je veux des histoires de vie. Voilà, de vie. Parce que si on commence à rentrer dans la politique et dans la religion, tout de suite, c'est de l'énervement. Hein, on le sait. Bon. Donc c'est pas. Puis de toute façon, on se convaincra pas. Et puis je suis pas là pour les convaincre. Je suis pas là pour les confesser non plus. Bon. Et c'est marrant parce qu'il y en a qui racontent, j'en ai rencontré un l'autre jour qui était extrêmement touchant, un type qui me racontait qu'il avait été le tailleur de Nasser et puis surtout le tailleur de Sadat et qu'il avait aussi été un peu le tailleur de Moubarak. Mais c'est faux en réalité, je sais que c'est pas vrai. Hein. Mais il raconte bien. Voilà, alors il a des photos, il a des lettres. Parce
il a des photos.
Oui, il a des photos de lui avec Sadat.
And you have this kind of small workshops of a carpenter, and especially in the old city and in downtown, you have these people who are absolutely amazing in doing things that are gradually disappearing. This is sad, but at the same time, well, you have to help them to keep them alive. If it's still needed, yes, they will keep it. If not, we will not.